some thermal pads between the metal backplate and the PCB. Well, I see there's, looks like there's some in there, but it's not quite making contact with anything. I don't know if you can see that. It's stuck on the heat spreader side, but it's not touching the PCB. What else can we see? Oh, it's better than the early revision cards, but yeah, it's still not everywhere it could be on that metal backplate. So this thing's got a heat chamber cooler and heat pipes. Got quite a big heatsink. Well, it weighs about 1.8 kilos. That's about right. It's pretty heavy. So yeah, it's got 3 fans, big cooler. So let's do the assessment, shall we? Alright, let's take a proper look at this card for a second without RGB lighting on it. So you notice, pretty straightforward. It's got 6 outputs. Now you can only use 3 or 4 of those at the same time. You've got 3 HDMI and 3 DisplayPort. Don't go thinking you can run 6 screens off that, because you can't. It's 3 or 4. I don't know, I have to look up the specs. Another thing I noticed about this card is the distance of the heatsink fin spacing is quite large. Now you could criticize that and say, oh, you need to have a high density high density of fins to get more heat off. But one advantage that a lot of people haven't thought of having thick spacing on the fins is less dust accumulation. So something I've found working in the industry I work in, which is IT, you have these fins too close together, it literally acts like a filter, and within a few weeks you're blowing all the dust out, because the dust just sticks, and it sticks to the outside of the heatsink, so there's literally no airflow through the heatsink. Whereas I find that heatsink that have higher spacing, the dust, even though the dust might go in, it's not going to block the airflow over the entire heatsink. So I'm actually going to give AORUS Gigabyte a point for that. Like, I think that's good. They've got bigger spacing, and the heatsink's so damn big anyway, it's not going to be a huge issue. Like, even if it cools as well as a smaller heatsink with closer packed fins, I'd still prefer a bigger heatsink with better spacing on those fins. Yeah, in all, I think it's quite a nice card. I do think the EVGA is probably slightly better than this. I'm not going to power it up right now because my test rig's kind of dismantled, but that's where your LCD display is there. And this is to replace the AORUS GTX 1060 6GB that's currently in my desktop computer. And that's about, 6 years old now. So that AORUS has lasted me quite a long time and been very reliable. So I'm more than happy to replace it with another AORUS. Looking forward to this bad boy for running for some time. Alright, so here we have the assessment on the old RTX 3080. So up here on the screen is the criteria that I judged them by. So cooler, we've got aluminium, heat pipes, heat chamber, and depending on what it has, I give it a different score. So let's get into it. We've got heat chamber and heat pipes on this 3080. So heat chambers are my favorite coolers, as you'll know if you've watched my previous videos of mining. They're the most expensive, but also the most efficient, and there's lots of reasons why, and you can go check out Gamers Nexus on why they are so good. I'm not going to explain it here. Next, we have 3 fans, so it gets a score of 3 out of 3. Has a metal backplate. There's some thermal pads there, but the memory is not covered, and I'm like, oh man. And also it looks like there's a thermal pad behind the GPU that's not actually making contact, as you saw in that video. So I'd drop a point there. I'm just going to say it's got metal. I'm actually going to pull that apart at a later time and put some more thermal pads in there, because I'm not impressed with Gigabyte's layout. So the thermal pad Thermal pad coverage looks okay on this revision. I think the revision 1 I saw a review of the revision 1 card, and it wasn't that great, but this looks like looks like they've fixed it on that. RAM cooling, so it goes onto the copper plate. So they've got thick 2mm heat, thermal pads, but I don't know. It's too thick, you know. Like 0.5 mil or less is what I think is good. So I'm giving that a 3 out of 4. Aesthetics, it's a nice looking card. There's still just something about it. It just looks a little bit out there. So I've only given it a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5. Noise is not bad. Under load, 80% fan. You can hear it, but it's not terrible. I don't mind hearing fans as long as it's not ridiculously loud. You know, you hear the fans, you know they're doing their job at least. The blower fans are terrible though. So anyway, 2 out of 3 for that one. Extra points. The mini LCD display is really cool, and I like that. So I give you an extra point. Has a case badge, which is always a winner. And there are switches on the card. So I've given them a point for that. And that gives it a total Mike's Rig score of 26 out of 30. So let's have a look at the charts. Oh, look at that. It's at the top. Being the first one I've ever reviewed on here. It's coming out number 1. So it's doing pretty well. Alrighty. So that's that. Not a bad card. I'm looking forward to doing some work with this card. I've got an upcoming video where I'm going to try and get it to work on a 550 watt power supply and go through the minimum requirements. So I think they say it's a minimum 750 watt, but we'll get a 550 watt working on this, no worries. Alright, catch you later.